Welcome. Thanks for coming. So this is the last talk in the breakout room. We've got lightning talks after this, but your last speaker is Richard Jones, who's the creator of and is still responsible for PyPi, the Python package index. And the talk today will be called Devpi, your one-stop cheese shop. Please welcome Richard.
Thanks. Something I need to clear up right at the start of the talk is that the Python package index has had a number of names. Right at the start, people were referring to it as PyPi. And the problem with that was that we were sprinting at one of the US PyCons, and people would come up to the table and say, "Is this the PyPi sprint?" And we'd say, "Yeah." And they'd sit down and we'd talk about what we were doing, and then they'd get up and go to the other PyPi sprint. So Barry Warsaw, who was there, he's better at naming things than I am. He decided that we should call it the cheese shop. Unfortunately, that wasn't very popular with people wearing suits. So it's now again called the Python package index, or PyPi, which just rolls off the tongue. I will probably refer to it mostly as the cheese shop during this talk. Just so we're clear, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so Devpi is what I'm here to talk about, though. So what is Devpi? At its most basic, it is a proxy mirror for the cheese shop. It can act as a local self-updating caching mirror that works with pip to install packages. And it can basically isolate you from network issues getting to the cheese shop. It can also act as a private index itself, allowing you to upload packages to it to be then installed using pip. A bit of kind of history about how we got to needing something like Devpi. So in 2003, the cheese shop was created as a place to collect links to Python packages or Python software. It didn't store any packages itself. That was added later on, a couple of years later. And then about 7 or 8 years later, CI, or continuous integration systems, became very popular. And the cheese shop was hit really hard as suddenly all these people were installing all these Jenkinses and all those sorts of things and pointing directly at this one server to obtain all of their installation files. So we did a few things to try and cope with that. We added mirroring, an actual mirroring protocol, and set up some mirrors. They didn't work so well. We cleaned up the way that packages discovered, so that we preferred to find packages on the cheese shop itself. Packages that were stored externally were very much a special case now. We added CDN using Fastly to cache the packages in geographically diverse locations. So, for example, in Australia, we use a cache that's up in Singapore, which means we get much faster response times to installation, to receiving those files. We added wheels to also speed up installation for Mac and Windows users, Linux users, sorry. All of those things accelerated the installation process. So installing things today using the cheese shop is significantly faster than it was about 3 years ago. We're doing some more work. We're looking to clean up that externally hosted packages thing even more. So at the moment, to install a package that's not stored on the cheese shop, we do HTML scraping to find links to things that might be package files stored on some random web server. There's an explicit external index proposal that's up for review at the moment that we're working on cleaning up, so that people who want to store their packages outside of the cheese shop will actually set up a kind of a mini cheese shop of their own. We're also looking at cleaning up metadata, and that's an ongoing effort as well, but that's not very much as related as what we're doing today, what I'm talking about today. We're also redeveloping the cheese shop code base itself, but it's intended to be completely compatible with the current, API compatible with the current server. So again, that won't really affect what we're talking about today. The internet, though, that's still an issue. We can't really do much about that. So there's a whole lot of these caching, proxy, mirroring things out there, because basically they're pretty easy to write. and I actually did a survey of them about a year ago and wrote a blog post so that you can kind of see the list of them in the middle there. They're mostly a bit crap. They're not maintained generally. They're not tested generally. And I was so unimpressed with the general lot of them that I ended up writing my own. And it was crap in its own special ways. So I was just adding to the mess. And then a little while later, I discovered Devpi, and so, don't use mine. It's terrible. The thing about Devpi, it's been around for a little while, but it initially had a dependency on Redis for storing its local data. And the author got rid of that, so it's much easier to install now. So compared to all those solutions, the nice thing about Devpi is it's principled in the way it's been developed and the way it operates. Most importantly, it wraps the existing tool base. So things like pip for installing things, the package info module that is used by a bunch of things, distutils, it kind of wraps all of that and works with them rather than developing something wholly new. Things like Python setup.py upload works when you're pointing at a Devpi instance, and pip install works when you're pointing at a Devpi instance. You don't have to do anything, they just work. It also provides functionality out of the box to do new ways of managing your packages and controlling releases of packages. And it's extensible, so you can add new functionality where it's missing. Testing, as I said, has been neglected by most of the solutions in this space. But Devpi, just the server alone, has got hundreds of tests, unit tests. And when it was there was a new release done about a year ago, and it was then stress tested against the entire content of the cheese shop, some 40,000 packages, to make sure it worked with all of the packages that were on there. And I'm pretty sure none of the other proxy mirrors can claim that they work with all of those. And finally, it's really simple to use, and I'll be showing you how simple it is to use in a moment. But more importantly, it's supported. You can actually get paid support for it if you want. But the author is very careful to make sure that migration between versions is kind of automatic. It has an export and import facility built into itself, and when you get a new release, you can just say, update yourself, and it does this virtual env export import dance thing to just migrate you over to the new version, which is really quite nice. So, PyPi caching proxy. What do we mean by all of that? The general idea is to isolate you from the network or the instability of the cheese shop itself. Devpi, its core idea is to be efficient and accurate and without needing a complete mirror of the entire something like 75 gigabytes of packages. Having said that, all of the files that are available on the cheese shop are visible in a Devpi index. So when you view the index, you'll see everything. But the file content and the metadata about those things isn't fetched until you attempt an installation. And then it goes off, automatically retrieves the files. It works with the changelog API that's built into the cheese shop. So it's not just a straight web service. Sorry, not a straight file web server. There's a changelog API in there that the Devpi server can use to intelligently figure out what packages have changed since some timestamp. The nice thing about Devpi, as opposed to most of the other proxy mirrors, is that all those files that are stored externally to the cheese shop are also cached. So, and there's not a huge number of those. It's something like, I think it's something like 7 or 8% of the packages that are indexed on the cheese shop are hosted externally. But it means that as a user of a Devpi server, you don't have to care where that file originally was hosted. You can be offline and you can still install it regardless of where that file was originally stored, which is really nice. Yeah. So the default installation of Devpi includes a single index in it, which is a mirror index, and it's at a URL of root/pypi. And it's automatically set up to proxy the main Chi shop server. The nice thing about Devpi is that you can extend that, as I've said before, with multiple indexes which you can then upload things to. These are called staging indexes, and you can have multiple user spaces and access control over each of those user spaces to restrict certain teams or whatever or users to who are able to upload files to those indexes. Download is open. There's no controls over download yet because nobody has ever actually said they would want it, but it might be added. So Devpi has built-in support for kind of moving releases around between indexes internally as well, and I'll talk about how that's useful in a little bit. The nice thing about the indexes is they can inherit from each other. So as a developer, using Devpi as both a mirror and as a private index, this is the sort of the basic sort of configuration you might use, where the Chi shop is mirrored using the root PyPi mirror, which is, as I say, automatically set up. Then you create your own staging index. Any installation operation, like any pip install that you perform, you point it at the user dev URL of your Devpi, and it inherits all of the packages from the mirror. So you only have to have the single index that you're pointing at. You can upload new packages to that user dev, which are your private packages, or you could upload ones that perhaps override something that's on the public server, say if you need a local patch or something. Yeah, so it's fully compatible with all the current tools. So your setup.py upload, even upload docs works, and unlike the Chi shop, which for some reason it doesn't have versioned upload of documentation, Devpi has versioned upload of documentation, which means that if you look at the current hosting on the Chi shop under python-hosted.org, where we put all of the documentation that people upload to their packages, there's no version in the URL, but in Devpi there is. And again, pip install works. You don't have to do anything to your client-side tools to make this work, except say use this different index, and those different index flags have been built into these tools forever. The files that are served by Devpi include an MD5 hash of the content in the URL. So you can put, if you wish to, you can put an Nginx or something on the front of this to serve the static content, and it can do really nice things with high performance serving of that content, which is nice. All right. Oh yes, so one of the other nice things that's built into Devpi is the support for testing the packages that you've uploaded to it. So if you're using Tox, and you should be using Tox, and I'll tell you about that why you should be using Tox later, but if you're using Tox, it can generate a test result file which can be uploaded and attached to the package in the Devpi instance, and you can go and look at the packages to see the test results in there. And you can trigger that automatically to fire something with Jenkins or what have you. And I'll come back to this concept and show you a kind of a workflow or a situation where that's useful. But the nice thing about this is that it means that the file that you package up your software as a package, you put it up in the index, you can run your tests against that file, that packaged release, and then that is the file that can then be pushed out to the world. Unmodified if those tests all pass, and the index records that has a record of that testing, which is nice. The Devpi client tool has a bunch of other stuff built into it to manage the Devpi server. Just useful stuff. One of the nice things is that there's a straight JSON API that you can poke at to get information or change information if you decide that the other things don't go quite far enough. So, some use cases. The most basic use case, which is one that I use on my laptop, is just have a straight Devpi install, no modification, that I can use to isolate myself from the internet and have much faster installations. Simple to install. You pip install Devpi. Devpi server has its own start, stop, restart, status, all those things built into it. So your Devpi start puts it in the background. It's got some log files. It stores its files away. It tells you where it does all this stuff. Tells you the URL that it's serving on, and then you run your pip install against that URL, and you grab the packages, and then you're offline. Once you've done that install once, you can pull the plug and you're offline. You can optionally configure the URL in your pip config file, and I'll come back to that. So I was talking about that concept of an inherited index, where you're doing some development. You want to push out a file that you're releasing, so you can push it up to your dev index and run some tests against it. You create an index using the devpi command line client, and you're basically telling it what the URL is that it should be created at. So you're creating a user. And then each user can have multiple indexes, so you could have a dev and a release index. Here I'm just creating, the user is called user. Possibly I should have called it a different name, but anyway. Devpi user is the command, and devpi index creates an index for that user. And the bases equals root is saying inherit everything from that other index inside devpi. Then to use that index, you have to log in as the user. You can optionally set a password here. I didn't bother for the purposes of what I've captured here, but you can set a password to protect that login. You can also, there's experimental support for having SSL client certificates to have the authentication of that access. Right. So then to release files using and work with that index, we say devpi use and that index URL, and that basically then tells the devpi client that that's the index it should be using for subsequent commands. You can whack in an option in the use command here, --set config, and that will go off and edit the 4 different places that our wonderful packaging tools use to configure the indexes that they use. So your pip config, your distlib config, I forget the other 2, setup tools, I think. And it edits all those to switch their default indexes over to using that index. So this is what I do on my laptop typically. After I've got devpi up and running, I say devpi use set config and the local URL, and then all of my pip commands, all of my talks, all of everything else will just start using the index on my laptop. This implies that, this command implies that we've previously done the creation and logged in and stuff. So yeah. Devpi's got a bunch of convenience tools built into it, like upload. So what this is going to do is effectively run setup.py sdist, bdist wheel, whatever, and uploads the resulting files to your staging index, your user dev index. It also does a thing called a version control system clean build if you're inside a directory that's a Git or a Mercurial repository. So it exports that repository out to a temporary directory and does the build there. So it reduces the chance that you've stuffed up and not checked in a file, or you've got some other files in there that shouldn't be released, and that sort of stuff. So the chances of pollution or accidents is reduced. Also, devpi upload doesn't use distutils to do the upload, so it actually can do SSL upload, which is nice, secure. Then the testing stuff is fired off simply by saying devpi test and the name of the package that you just uploaded. That will then download that file from the index, unpack it in a temporary directory, and run tox. And so it'll just automatically look at your tox.ini file and run the tests that are appropriate in there. When it's done, it uploads the result JSON file back to the devpi server, and you can do that in multiple environments, so you're testing across different operating systems or whatever. And again, you can fire this off automatically in response to the upload command. You can fire off a Jenkins that does that automatically if you like. And once you're happy that your testing is complete, you say devpi push the package and the version that you've just uploaded, and you say we're pushing to an actual Python package index, the name of the Python package index. And that is the name that comes out of your .py, God damn it, your cheese shop RC, your PyPi RC file. That's the name that's actually in there that tells it the credentials to use for that push. And again, that'll go over SSL because that's not using distutils either. So it's kind of like what Twine does to do the upload. Twine's another tool for managing uploading of files to the cheese shop. But this is integrated. This is basically pulling the file from the devpi staging index, the one that you've run your tests against, and it's pushing that exact file out to the cheese shop. So the actual thing being released is the thing that you've actually tested, not some Git checkout. And of course, we know how reliable Git checkouts are at being consistent. So it's actually the thing that you've tested. The final thing I want to talk about or scenario I want to talk about is kind of a company deployment. So I've talked about kind of a silo, cheese shop, root, cheese shop, mirror, and then a staging index for a single user. It's pretty simple to then have that branch out, to have multiple projects sitting underneath, and this is, again, this could be simplified. I don't know. This could be a simplified version of whatever might go on in your organization. But you can have your teams running in their own dev instances. And so these two indexes at the bottom are the ones that teams push their files up to and do their testing against. They're the pre-release sort of staging areas. And once those files have been tested and have been okayed, they can be pushed up to the company release staging area. And then that might just be where they stop. That could be, if it's a company thing, they could be private packages, that's where they stop. But then if they're then released out into the wilds, say for example, if it's an OpenStack project, then they can be pushed out to the wide world from there. The indexes have an attribute called volatility, which means that the dev indexes at the bottom there are marked volatile, which basically means you can re-upload a file of the same version to those indexes to replace content. So if you've uploaded a file and the tests don't pass, you can still upload another file. The release index would be marked not volatile. So once a release has been pushed up there and other people are starting to use it, it can't be replaced, which is just like the cheese shop itself, except for that loophole. And to do that release, instead of doing that push to PyPi:/PyPi, you just release to company/release, push to company/release. And then from there, again, you could do a release from there to PyPi:/PyPi. Something that was added in the most recent version of Devpi, which was released last week, is replication, which is a fairly simple to use replication of the Devpi servers. So you run a single server, and then the intent here is to provide high availability or faster installs through geographic closeness or whatever. And so you run your server as usual, but then you have replicated servers which just, in their configuration, just points at that master server. And then any changes in the master server are just replicated out to those other servers. You can also, any changes made to those remotes, those replica servers are propagated back up to the master as well. So teams can have their servers sitting close to them if they're geographically separated, and they push up to their local server. Those changes are then pushed up to the master server as well. And again, there's experimental support for SSL certificates for protecting these the replication protocol. Too many words. All right, I've got a few more minutes, so I'm just going to quickly talk about some complementary tools that you might run into in the Devpi space. Tox, which is awesome, and you should use it. Tox's goal is to automate and standardize testing in Python. Along with Devpi and to a lesser extent py.test, it's part of a larger vision of making packaging and testing and releasing Python software a lot easier. That's a basic tox.ini. Hold on. Man. That's a basic tox.ini. Okay, just give me a sec. Somehow I managed to apply the blank master to some of these slides accidentally. So this is a basic tox.ini, and what it's saying, you put it in the top level of your project in the same level as your setup.py. And it basically says to run your unit tests in a Python 2.7 and a Python 3.4 environment. So the Py2.7, Py3.4 are tokens that Tox recognizes as being environments that it knows about, that are built into Tox. And for each of those environments, we install PyTest. The dependency is PyTest. You could have a dependency here of -r requirements.txt if you have lots of dependencies, or -r requirements-test.txt, or something like that. Okay, and it installs those things into a new virtual environment for that environment, and then it runs the testing command, which in this case is py.test. You could use nose, but don't. So running Tox, so running Tox will now create a virtual env for each of those environments, Python 2.7, Python 3.4, and then run PyTest in each of those and give you a report at the end of all of those runs. And this is a very simple example. I've used Tox to fire off JavaScript testing and flakate tests and coverage and all those things as well. It's all these features. It's got all these features. I'm not going to go over these. It's really cool. You should use it. But again, the idea that it's simplifying testing, making it easier to control your test runs, making it easier to invoke your test runs, and consistent. So all you have to do is type Tox, and that's it. And all of the installation around it is managed, all around your tests, and isolation around your tests is managed for you. And if you're using Devpi test, it's creating a whole new thing for that package that you're testing for you, all handled, which I think is quite nice. Oh, and there's integration with Jenkins if you like that sort of thing. So the other thing I want to quickly mention is Bandersnatch, which is what you should use if you really, absolutely, for some bizarre reason, really need that 70 gigabyte mirror of the cheese shop. You don't get all the external packages because Bandersnatch doesn't do that thing that Devpi does by spidering and finding those packages. Just gives you the stuff that's hosted on there. I'm yet to find somebody who can give me a really good reason why they want a 70 gigabyte mirror. Okay, you can mention it, but so you can do this though. Okay, it exists. I'm genuinely interested. So you can do it though. This exists. It uses a protocol to get you a proper mirror that's up to date and low effort and all that jazz. So yeah, that's there. This is a neat thing. It takes a list of Python packages specified in like a requirements.txt file and fills a Devpi index with them. So if you have a project and you don't want to run your something artificial, if you want to just quickly load up all those packages into your Devpi, then you just run Devpi builder. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say. There's the URL to the Devpi stuffs. And we've got a minute or two for questions, I think. or statements as they may be.
Okay, my need.
Yeah.
I am in theory planning a cruise for
Oh,
coders.
yeah, well, that's different.
Yeah,
And-
it's a need, and I'm like, this would be a very interesting setup. People could cache
Yeah.
locally, but we could take PyPi with us.
Yeah, we'd have to do something different as well, though, so that we can get all those externals. But we could figure something out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I'll just make you head of the tech stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Okay. Questions.
Quickly, same use case. Every year there's a bunch of web developers meeting in the UK, locking themselves up for a week in a fort. No internet for anyone, and they code something good, usually in Python. They need it.
Yeah. That sort of environment, sure. But organisations which actually have an internet connection running a full Bandersnatch mirror, I don't understand that.
So, just as a plus one, I've been to DevFort, and we do indeed take mirrors of things like the whole of Wikipedia, the entire Stack Overflow dump, and this will be awesome.
Okay, fine. These
Just
bizarro...
but
by
I
the
had a
way, and
question.
where's my invitation to these things?
Oh, you should totally come. It's great fun.
Yeah.
What you said, don't use nose. Why shouldn't we use nose?
Oh, it's terrible. No, sorry. I've had extensive use of both Nose and PyTest, and I just much prefer PyTest's discovery of tests and its management of the test run in terms of capture of logging and errors. Its interrogation of errors is much more in depth, so the report that you get, it has much more detail about exactly what went wrong. So it doesn't just say this assertion failed. It tells you this assertion failed because these are the values that were in the assertion. And that is incredibly valuable, especially when it can be like two lists. And it's like, well, it failed because the lists weren't the same. I was like, well, that's great Nose. PyTest says because the element 9 was different. And these are the values.
Okay.
One of the many, many reasons why Maven proxies
Hang on,
suck.
questions are an interrogative phrase
Sure.
designed to elicit information.
It starts with a statement and then goes into a question. So one of the reasons why Maven proxies really suck is because they download the full version of the artifact from the source server before then sending the first byte back to the client who just originally requested it. So this is in the case that you were showing where you have a proxy server between you and PyPi and you have a cache miss, right? So because it takes so long to get that first byte, often the clients end up timing out.
I believe Devpi starts streaming it straight away.
Excellent.
Certainly my implementation did, so I'd hope it does, because mine was crappy and this isn't.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Is there an intention to eventually make this for PyPi, its cheese shop, to be a blessed version of Devpi?
It already is. The Python package index has blessed this as a tool that is good.
Oh, cool.
And similarly, Bandersnatch. Yeah. If you can't remember all of this and you're a little bit lost, go to the packaging.python.org URL, which is where the Python packaging user guide exists now. It's the central location for documentation about packaging. There's a link there about caching and mirroring, and it talks about Devpi and Bandersnatch.
So I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.